Well, welcome everybody to Pastor and the Recovering Heretic. I'm the pastor, sometimes Recovering Heretic, and with us is Dan.
The always recovering heretic.
Yeah.
Or always heretic, sometimes recovering?
Always recovering.
Yeah.
I like that one. So, welcome.
I am the voice of you, the questioner.
Yes.
So just that reminder, if you have questions for today, whether or not they're on the topic, doesn't matter. If it's just on your mind, post them in the chat box, and we will get right to it. So.
Yep. And ask anything, really. We're up for anything.
And I wasn't sure if Pastor was going to go for this particular question today, but our lead topic is this. Is it okay to argue with God?
Yeah. Yes.
And I'll leave that as an open question.
As an open question?
And then we'll burrow down to specifics.
And then we'll burrow down into it. So if the Bible is any indication, the answer is yes. My favorite story is actually with Abraham, where he negotiates God down from 100 righteous people to 10 righteous. He'll save the city of Sodom and Gomorrah if there's but 10 righteous people.
Yeah.
You know, and I love it how he does it the whole time. You know, it's what if there are 95? Will you kill everybody for being short of 5? Well, no. Well, what if there's 80? You know, for being short of 20, will you? Gets them all the way down to 10, and then he stops, figuring, you know, I've negotiated enough.
Yeah. And Abraham sounds like he's the public defender of humanity.
He can be, right, public defender. He is a real person, not like literal per se, although I think he is literal, but
But as a character.
But as a character, he's a real human being, and so he's always advocating for the real human being.
Yeah.
To both his detriment and his, and his fortune. So.
And that's kind of, we get famous people in the Bible, I guess, who maybe God's making exceptions for. Adam, obviously, Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Who are kind of passing the blame on.
Right.
Abraham, who several times is kind of negotiating with God. And even in today's reading, there's almost a deal-making going on with the kid. God comes down almost like he's a traveling salesman to Abraham and says, have I got a deal for you?
Yeah.
And you do this and I'll do this for you. So there's almost this implied negotiation and ability to argue with God for Abraham right from the beginning. Moses argues with God
all the time.
Right from the beginning. You're going to go and tell Pharaoh this. No, I'm not. Why not? Because I have a speech impediment. You can't make me.
Right.
Oh, God, I can make you do anything, but he doesn't.
Right.
And then right up to the gospel reading today, the tradition continues, because Peter argues with Jesus.
Yeah, right. Peter's a little different. Peter's actually wrong on his case. And so, right up to Peter. I mean, so it is a part of faith. I think of it, when I'm in premarital counseling with a couple, my first question is always, how often do you argue? And I tell them to be honest with me about that. And the reason is because the couple who says we don't argue, or we've really only argued once, is actually the couple I'm most afraid for. Because if you're really communicating, you're going to argue. There's just no way around it.
Like our off-camera discussion will be about anime.
Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah, right. I mean, if you're really in relationship with somebody, there will be an opportunity to fight. And so I think it goes with God too. And God even uses the marriage metaphor often. So the question, it goes with God as much as it goes with our spouses. If you're really in relationship with this God, you're going to argue. So I've had my own shouting matches with God in the sanctuary. I give everybody permission here to walk in the sanctuary any day of the week and have your shouting match. It's fine. I do it. It's okay. It comes with a caveat, a warning, and the warning is beware God might answer. Because this is Job's thing, right? The whole book of Job is an argument, and it's really an argument. It's with his friends, but Job's also arguing with God. The last 3 chapters of Job are God answering, and it says, and it's God, and it says, God answered Job out of the whirlwind. And I kid you not, this is a quote from the Bible. God says, gird up your loins like a man, for I am about to answer you.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so, like Jesus today with Peter, like God with Job, beware. God may answer.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm not saying don't do it. Please do it, actually. It's a sign of healthy faith to argue. You know, but it always, he's not a tame God, right? The Lewis line. Right?
Yeah.
So beware. It comes with a bit of danger involved.
Well, and that gets to, and I wasn't sure about how to react to this, but Dan and Donna Swain, they make the comment that you can argue, but you can't win.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, right, you can absolutely argue, and God's going to get his way kind of in the end. Like he does with Moses, right? I mean, you know, Moses says, I can't speak. And God says, well, you're going anyway. You can take your brother.
And your brother can be your mouthpiece.
And my brother can be your mouthpiece. But if you read the text carefully, actually, Moses ends up doing a heck of a lot of speaking. Anyway. And so, right, you know, God will adjust the plan, you know, for the argument, but God's going to get his end goal anyway. There's no way around that.
Well,
so,
do you think he knows that and he's amused? Because Abraham's a good example, because Abraham seems to win.
Right.
Pretty much every time.
Right. And
or
then
was God like, that was kind of a test? Do you have the mentality to argue with me?
Yeah, I mean,
win and convince me.
Yeah, is it a real relationship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of always the question. So, is it a real relationship? You know.
Yeah, and that kind of, in that regard, from a pop culture standpoint, I've always found Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof a model for that. It's
me too.
And
yes.
that always seems healthy,
right?
You know, because he goes to God with everything,
right?
With little things, with big things, with joy. He yells at God.
Right,
he laughs with God.
Right, with the donkey. Right. Yeah. Right.
And is that how it should be?
Like
God's our BFF. And
right.
So just say anything.
If I could show, everybody should watch Fiddler on the Roof. Not only because it's a great musical, but because it's the greatest primer on how to pray ever, you know. Because the main character, Tevye, has this way of just talking. And he's just talking to God, you know. And it almost sounds like a conversation. It's half argument, half conversation, and it's beautiful. And you should all go watch Fiddler on the Roof because it's one of the most powerful musicals, but it's also just an amazing example on how prayer should work, in my opinion.
Well, maybe we could do an online video watch.
Right. Yeah. Right. Online watch. Right. Watch this with us. Right.
And then you can give us commentary afterwards.
Yeah. Right. Right. That would be great.
I think that would be cool. Renee is asking basically, I think, you know, argue about what? Are there topics that are good, topics that are bad, or like Tevye, is anything?
I think almost anything's on the table. You know, again, be careful. So, like, Peter's problem today is Peter's not just arguing with Jesus; he's trying to correct Jesus. You know,
okay. So that's a different. Well, and you're going to have to help me here because Abraham seems like the same thing.
He does. It's a fine dotted line.
Okay.
You know, but and what Peter's trying to do is Peter's trying to correct Jesus towards something that is what everybody's tempted towards with the Messiah. You know, because in the gospel lesson today, right? This is right after the Transfiguration, right? So
Peter should have had his proof right there.
Well, it's just Peter's had his proof, right? And Peter's had this moment. He's seen Jesus with Moses and Elijah and the very voice of God, and God told him directly on the mountaintop, "Listen to this dude," right? You know, listen to him.
He's my boy.
Right, he's my boy. And then, so the next thing in all three Gospels that Jesus does is he starts warning them about the cross, right? And he says, the Messiah will be crucified and will suffer, and Peter's not listening. You know, God said, listen to him. Peter's like, that can't be. The Messiah is not supposed to suffer and die. You know, which is the temptation for the Messiah kind of period, right? And so the result is that Jesus rebukes him quite strongly and says, "Get behind me, Satan," because, and so there are topics where you're off base, when you're trying to get away from the message of the cross, then you got a problem, and then in your argument, again, if we're taking Job as an example, just be careful, right? Job gets a direct encounter with God at the end of the story. The trick is God doesn't answer any of Job's questions or accusations. What God does is God asks Job a series of questions that Job can't answer. And so God goes on this extended speech 3 times about, where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? Are you the one who shuts the snow in the vaults of heaven and causes it to rain down again? Can you describe a snowflake to me, like in all of its intricacies? Do you know where the dew is stored for the morning glory? All these. And so for all of Job's argument, and he gets this direct, very smash in your face encounter with God out of the whirlwind, and God never answers any of Job's questions. God just says, riddle me this, human. And so in addition to you can be wrong if you drift from the cross, you can just be careful because he's a living God. He might answer.
And real quick, I want to say, I encourage more questions.
This is great. Yeah.
Because I know with people just talking, just overhearing conversations in the North, this is something people wonder about. So if you got a specific ask.
Yeah.
But on that, it seems like, God even treats different people differently. Like in Job's case, he treats him like he's a wiseacre.
Yeah.
Smack you down, put you in your place.
Right.
Think you know it all.
Yep.
But then Abraham, he lets go on, like a great attorney arguing for the case of humanity and talking God down.
Right.
He's almost like Abraham is God's counselor.
Right. Yeah.
Like, whoa, you're losing your temper here, dude.
Right.
Let's bring this down a little bit.
Right. Moses does that a couple times too. Where God's like, "I'll destroy them all and start over with you," and Moses is like, "Well, hold on a minute here.
Let's talk about this."
Yeah. Let's. Yeah.
And so, how do you know? How do you know which side you're on? Was it Jacob who wrestled with God?
Yep. Jacob who wrestles with God.
Yeah. Jacob wrestles with God, wins.
Yes. He limps for the rest. He limps for the rest of his life, though. You got to remember that little detail.
He does sustain an injury, but he is victorious.
Yeah, right.
So, how do I know? Like, if I'm going to get in an argument with God, I'm going to take you up on the offer. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to scream and yell, and just tell God he is wrong.
Right. Which one are you going to get?
Yeah. How do I know what reaction I'm going to get? Am I going to get the whirlwind from Job, or I'm going to get the Abraham special treatment?
I cannot guarantee either way. Well, you don't know, right? Yeah. When you start an argument with your spouse, you don't know which side you're going to get. Are you going to get the bemused spouse, or is this a day where your spouse is having a bad day, right? And you've touched a nerve, My wife and I's favorite story is when we were dating, we had this running argument about Alexis de Tocqueville. And people thought we were seriously arguing. For us, it was a fun argument.
Right.
But if I start that argument up when she's prepping for a trial, that wrong time, right? And so you don't know. That's part of real people, real living beings, is you don't have control over their reactions.
Yeah.
Right? And so in a similar way, we don't have a control over God's reaction. He's a living being. I can guarantee you his love never fails. His forgiveness is sure. His steadfast love endures forever. Those things I can guarantee about him because that's who he is.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean that every now and then he's not going to smack you upside
down. Right. Doesn't mean you won't get, and sometimes you need it, right? Yeah. Sometimes I need that 2x4 upside the head to.
Renee will tell you I need that like with everything.
Right. So see.
I should have swelling and bruises all over.
Right. My call to seminary when I was going to be a pastor, I didn't want to be a pastor. I didn't want to be a pastor because my mom's a pastor, and I saw what pastoring was like, and I thought, you're crazy. Who wants to do that job?
Yeah. And well, I want to say, and I don't mean this as a idle compliment, but you're so good at it. Why wouldn't that alone be enough to try to keep you away?
Well, and so I had this very clear conversation with God one night, sophomore year of college, and I said, I can't preach. Get away from me. Get off my back, basically.
So you were feeling the tug.
Yeah, well, I was feeling the tug in many ways, but I said, stop it. I can't preach. End of story. I'm done. That's my response. Literally the next day, I got this paperback from my Paul's Letters class. I went to a Christian college, so I took a class on Paul's Letters. Got this paperback. I got a B+ on it, and I was really angry because I thought it was A work, and I didn't do A work very often in the school because I don't like school. And so when I did A work, I felt I deserved it, and so I was angry about this, and I got a B+. And the reason I got a B+ is in the style and diction section my professor had written doesn't sound like an academic paper. In fact, sounds an awful lot like a sermon. And he'd written amens in the margin, and so that was the moment where I finally said, okay, you win.
Yeah.
And that was a very clear argument the whole way through. Talk about being smacked with a 2x4. That was it. That was like, I called my assistant to the bishop the next day. Because it's like, fine, you win, God. I wasn't happy about it either. Being happy about it was a totally different part of the story, right? And so, again, you never know. Watch out, right?
Yeah.
It's good to argue. You should argue. God has a habit of responding.
Well, I have to ask, too, then, and this is personal for me, and I'm hoping that this affects other people. And I'm not the only one, the odd man out on this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the hint.
Oh.
I'm never really sure. Renee is probably rolling her eyes. I can't tell with the lights.
Mm-hmm.
I will pray and pray and pray for something.
Mm-hmm.
I will argue and argue and argue.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get the hint. I can't tell when is something just fate. Mm-hmm. When am I being given hints that I've got to change my course?
Yeah.
And when is it actually a test and I should remain steadfast and stay on the course?
Mm-hmm.
I can't distinguish between what I'm being told and then how I should react to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard thing. So I don't think it all comes in, simple advice. If it's repetitive, wake up. And so if you keep getting, I had this idea for a ministry back in Youngstown, and I didn't really know if I should do it. And I kept having people out of the blue just kind of pop up saying, oh, that would be a good idea. But the first 4 times it happened, I was kind of like, oh, that's just coincidence. About the 5th time, I finally was like, oh, maybe this is, it ended up being a good thing to do, So repetition's a key thing, just simple. If you keep noticing this coincidence, it's probably not coincidence anymore, There's also why we have community, right? And so I didn't come to that decision just on my own, and I called my mom about it, and I described it to her, and my initial reaction was just kind of annoyance. I didn't immediately kind of say, oh, this is God telling me I need to do that. My immediate reaction was, oh, this is really annoying. Even my professors are on me about this. And it took
you didn't see anything behind that.
Right, and it took my mom kind of saying, well, what do you think, basically she said, how many times does it have to be said to you before you wake up? And so it takes community sometimes. That's why we bring it to the community, why you talk to people in church, why you, to somebody to say, well, maybe this is what God is telling you, So community, bring it to the community. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
And then part of it is honestly just time. I don't think I exactly articulated that call story the way I just did just now when it first happened. It has. I think that's exactly what it is, but it's taken time looking back on the event, which is why, to even start the process, you got to write this long essay about your call story. Is to force you to kind of reflect on that.
Yeah.
And so it takes time and honest reflection about it sometimes. So not that it's not happening, but, if you're struggling with it, it's things of, have you brought it to the community? Does it keep happening? Mm-hmm. Do you, for me being a pastor, do people keep telling you you're going to be a pastor? If it's, if you want to do something at church, do people keep saying, oh, this would be a good idea, I wish somebody would do it? All those little things, repetition, bring it to the community. And then time, reflection. And you look back on it and say, oh, yeah, that's what that was.
So we're not going to have one of the things that has always, I saw in my life, is people getting very direct, hit over the head messages. Pastor Bob Abrams, he used to be here. He used to talk about the fact that he was wrestling with it, and one day he heard God.
I think that happens sometimes. That's just not how God communicates to me.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely do, maybe you will get a voice that says, do this.
Yeah.
I will not have any experience with that because God doesn't communicate to me that way.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean God doesn't communicate to me. It just means Bob has that story, and I've heard him tell that story, and it's a great story, and it's a life-giving story. And if you get that gift, give thanks to God for it, because it's a brilliant thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I'm on the opposite end. I feel like it's always these subtle, like you referenced, riddle me this, these like really deep riddles that I can never figure out.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there are days I feel like God's getting us a cruel glee out of torturing me. Like just tantalizing. Right. I've got a message for you, but you can't figure it out.
But you can't figure it out. Yeah, right. I don't know why. It would be easier if God spoke to me the way he spoke to Bob.
Yeah.
I
would kind of like that.
Yeah, I would like that. On the other hand, I might
text me. I'll take a text.
Right, I'll take a text. Right, you know my phone number. Messaging rates apply.
Jesus called me on the phone once, which is a story for another.
Yeah, that's a story. Right.
But yeah, why not that? Why not for real? Why doesn't the phone ring with that?
I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for me. If he did that with me, it would give me more room to argue. I'd be more stubborn. The direct order is the quickest way to get me. It probably worked with Bob. The direct order got him to do it. The direct order is actually the quickest way to get me to not do what you want me to do. And so I think God knows that about me. And so had God given me a direct voice, my instinct would have been, no way. I refuse. Because
take this commandment and
right. I don't take orders from you.
You're not the boss of me.
Right, you're not the boss of me. I'm, and that's just, Kate can tell you this is all true about me. That's just who I am, and I think God knows that about me. And so God communicates to me with these persistent bee-sting nudges, until I kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Make Dave think it's his idea.
Right, or make him think that he had some part, humor him. And so I don't know. I don't know what it is for you, or for anybody else for that matter, at home. Again, some people God does speak to that way. My CPE supervisor I firmly believe, was a prophet, and could say, this is God's future for you. And it was terrifying, actually. But I don't have that gift. And Paul says that different people have different gifts. That's why we're a body together. Is different people have, not everybody's an arm, not everybody's an eyeball, not everybody's an ear. Some people are brains, some people are legs, some people are hands.
All right. Well, if we have an oracle in the congregation, please raise your hand.
Well,
I got a lot of questions.
We might. Right.
Well, and on that note, then, do we approach? I get frustrated over that, and that's part of where I feel like I need to argue with God.
Yeah.
Just tell me. Quit playing games.
Just tell me.
Do we approach arguing with God like we approach prayer? Is there a formula? Should we start with, a beseeching? Do we cross ourselves, or do you just launch into it? Do you just accept God is with you always? God is part of the cosmos, so He's going to hear you no matter what.
Right.
And so do you just launch into the argument? You already know what I'm angry about, so I'm just going to launch into the argument.
There is a formula, but like all formulas, it exists to make it easier for you, and so if you want the formula, that's great. It's called a lament, right? Is what it's called, and there's lots of what we call lament psalms.
Yeah.
And so Psalm 22 was our psalm today. That's kind of the quintessential lament psalm. But it begins with straight up your complaint, or it begins with who are you addressing? So, oh God, and then it begins with your complaint. So, oh God, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then and then you describe your situation, but the thing about the formula is that after you're done describing your situation, it ends on praise. And so Psalm 22, many bulls encircle me, I'm about to be trampled, everything that's happening to me is going to kill me, But then it begins with yet, that's usually the word, the yet of God. Yet I will praise you. Yet I will declare your glories in the sanctuary. And so
you treated me like dirt, but
I will praise your name. Anyway. Yeah. At Auschwitz, the rabbis there actually had a trial of God. They actually tried God for the Holocaust.
Wow. I have not read about that.
Yeah, they tried God for the Holocaust, and they found God guilty. And then the next thing they did was worship him.
So they found him guilty.
Yeah.
But then turned around and worshiped.
Yep.
Give me insight into that.
I don't know.
That is wisdom and tolerance and patience.
That is a devotion to your God beyond, And it's a story described by Elie Wiesel, who writes a really powerful book called Night. And he wrote a book called The Trial of God, and it's a play. And it's set in Russia during the pogroms, but it's based off what he said was a real event. He saw this happen when he was at Auschwitz.
Wow.
And so, I don't know, And in the book, in the play, Elie Wiesel, the character who's God's defense attorney is actually the devil.
That's a fascinating, so the devil defends God.
The devil's the one defending God.
I like that.
Do what you will.
Part of what I like about it is that when you really get deep into the lore, that's what the devil started as. His job was to be the tempter. Right. His job was to test your faith.
Right. It was prosecuting attorney, basically.
Yeah, he was. So it wasn't that he was evil. It was just like, no, I'm God's agent, and I'm seeing if you've really got what it takes. So I'm going to try to tempt you to do evil. And so it seems like it takes that old concept and brings it back.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. I don't know, like in real history, I don't know what, I guess all I can say about it is I hope to be at that point in my faith, where I can both find God guilty
and still
get on my knees and worship him at the same time.
Wow.
I've known people who get there. There's this woman who had 4 daughters, and over the course of her life, in 2 separate car accidents, 2 of her daughters had died. She was very angry with God. Showed up to Sunday worship every Sunday. I have no idea what motivated. If it were me, I would just say, hang it all. I'm done with it. But
there she was.
Still is at that church, actually. And so I don't know. I hope that's where all the argument builds to, is that moment in faith.
Yeah. And maybe that's the point of freeing yourself to argue with God.
Right.
So that you can get to that point.
Yep.
like any healthy relationship.
Right, like any healthy relationship. Right.
I think that is a very powerful message to end on. But I want one final positive note coming through in the chat. Donna Swain said to Dan today that Liam came to all of us this crazy year.
Yeah.
And what if he is a prophet?
I think
sent to basically do this, to steer us toward this relationship, these conclusions.
Right.
And Bridget says, who knows? He's got a whole future ahead of him. So what will it reveal?
Right. I think, not that Todd and Bridget are Abraham and Sarah, but I think in a similar way, this congregation is very blessed in that we can see miracles don't repeat, but sometimes they rhyme, and we can see a miracle that kind of rhymes with the life God gave in Abraham and Sarah, in Isaac. I think it's true about Liam, and we're very blessed. That's why Liam is a true blessing to the congregation, because we all get to watch it, we all get to see, oh wow, God does grant this life business all the time. It's awesome.
That's cool. And now we'll just have to be patient and see if Donna glimpsed the future.
Maybe. Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks. Thanks, everybody, for very active on chat today. It was really good.
That's what we want. That's our goal.
So you kept us from talking about Star Trek one more time.
Yeah.
But again, if you have questions in between, feel free. Post them on Facebook, on the RELC site. Email Pastor Dave at pastordave@relc.org. If you bump into us, but you can ask. You don't have to wait till the chat. Ask in advance. And as always, during that, we're reading them constantly and responding. So
absolutely.
Thanks very much for today. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. It was good.
Go have an argument with God.
Yes. Peace.